of all, let me introduce you because you are such an incredible woman. Kristyn is the founder of the Fertility Tribe, and she is a mother of two twin boy girl who are 18 months and you used IVF. And then you created this incredible community called, again, the Fertility Tribe. And you did it because you felt very isolated in your journey and experience to getting to become a mother, right? And I think that's really important to discuss. That's why you're here. And it's one of the things that we at AMA really love to pay attention to, because I have found in my personal life that having community just changes everything, right? It doesn't make you feel lonely, and your anxiety at least has somewhere else to go. You can share the weight of everything. And so without further ado, welcome, Kristyn. And
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, and we're so thrilled to have you. We saw your page and just fell in love. I mean, it is just...
Thank you. That means so much. It's such a passion project for me.
I know, and it's your website also. I mean, I literally last night was just going through the terminologies of like conception and fertility, and I know you and I talked about fertility and the word infertility and miscarriage and how much weight that feels, right? Like saying that you're infertile or you had a miscarriage really feels like you're being blamed for something. And
and the words carry such a stigma, and that's what this week's actually National Infertility Awareness Week, so it's all about sort of working towards ending that stigma surrounding all things fertility.
It's like the Super Bowl of fertility right now. My feed is just everything about fertility, the fertility journey. So why don't we get started by you telling us a little bit about the Fertility Tribe and why you started it, and a little bit about your journey.
Absolutely. So like you said, I have 18-month-old twins who were conceived via IVF, and it was a long road to get there. About 3 months after I got married, I went off the birth control pill in hopes of kind of just like flushing it out of my system after 11 years of being on it and restoring my normal cycle, and kind of beginning to try like the beginning stages of wanting to start trying to conceive. And then things just immediately did not go according to plan. I never got my cycle back. I got diagnosed with PCOS, which stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's one of the leading causes of infertility in the United States, and actually affects 1 in 10 women of childbearing age, which is one of the staggering statistics that we've been sharing this week. 1 in 8 couples either struggle to get pregnant or sustain a pregnancy, and 1 in 4 pregnancies end in a loss. So I think it's like the overall message that we're trying to spread this week is that infertility is way more common than anyone thinks, and way less talked about than it should be. So I kind of got thrust into the world of fertility treatments like before my mind could catch up, I guess I could say. Because I had a diagnosis, they sent me straight to the fertility doctor. So we were kind of like just in the beginning stages of trying, and yet here we were going to several doctor's appointments a week and really like just immersed in this world of fertility treatments. And
how old were you?
I was just going to say, we were actually only 28 when we started. So I just turned 28. So we were under 30, and the doctors just kept like reassuring me and my husband, saying, you know, you just need some ovulation meds and you'll be fine. You can't get pregnant unless you ovulate and know when you ovulate. So they kind of said it was going to be a quick fix, and that was what I was kind of leaning on, I guess. And it was not a quick fix. We went through multiple Clomid cycles, IUIs, everything failed. And finally, I just about begged my doctor to let me start IVF, because I was like, what's going to work? Like, let's just get to it. I'm not a very patient person by nature. So I was just like, I can't. I work full time. Actually today I posted on my page about how infertility can feel like a second job, and how it can affect your primary job, because it's just so much added stress, like physically and mentally, emotionally. So, and then my first IVF cycle actually ended up being really good. We ended up getting great results. And we got 12 embryos, which was amazing. But then my first transfer failed, which was devastating. And they don't really tell you that my National Infertility Awareness campaign this week is called Things No One Told Me About Infertility.
Amazing.
And that was kind of the root of how the Fertility Tribe got started, because they felt like no one ever talked about these things. No one ever told me that losing an embryo felt like a loss. And I've never been more devastated than that day. And luckily, my second transfer resulted in my twins. So happy ending to that story. But you know, it never really leaves you either. Like, I think, you know, pregnancy was hard after infertility. I constantly felt like the other shoe was going to drop and something was going to go wrong. And then I went to preterm labor with my twins and had kind of a rough situation there. Thankfully, I lasted till 37 weeks, which was a miracle. But yeah, I think it just all kind of carried with me. And even now I'm like, okay, I have embryos left. What do I do? Because that's not an easy decision either. And so I think just all of this, I ended up starting the Fertility Tribe when I was pregnant, kind of as a hindsight's 2020. Here's all the things that I wish I knew when I was going through infertility or when I started treatments. And it started as a personal infertility blog. And then about a year ago, I kind of hired a designer and I really wanted to turn it into like more of a community and a resource. So it's kind of evolved from there. But I think the goal is really to share stories and let women know that they're not alone on their journey, because that's something that's so important, I think.
And it's so incredible. And you have an incredible website that's incredibly informative and beautiful. And so if mamas, you are watching this, and soon to be mamas and desiring mamas are watching this, go to her website. It is incredible. And I learned so much information about everything. I mean, it was as knowledgeable as many doctors. And I thought almost even more important, because you're sharing real stories of real women going through the fertility journey, right? And that is, you know, Emily and I talk about this a lot, that, you know, sharing our stories and sharing our experience it's I always say game changing, but it's game changing. You don't feel alone in this crazy world. It doesn't feel like you are, you know, running in a direction that nobody else has done, or a race that nobody has competed in. And so when you're able to connect with women, and again, this is why we really wanted to talk to you, because when you're able to connect, and we have something called Alma Circles, by the way. So if women are feeling or any steps of their fertility journey, you can join other mamas going through that. And actually this week was so cool, because at our Alma Gratitude Circle, which is Mondays at 11:30 a.m. via Zoom, it's intimate. It's me and Emily and our team and a bunch of other mamas. We had two mamas who got together afterwards, whose both their children were autistic, and they had like a conversation on the Zoom after our gratitude circle was done. And it's just so amazing to connect moms. So we think what you're doing is just incredibly powerful and game changing. So I guess tell me a little bit about what you're seeing on your side is the most helpful thing that you guys are doing, and what women who are on this journey, what would you suggest is the first step to recovery is like the wrong word, but the first step to kind of relieving the stress of not being a mother yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think, well, number one, I think that just seeing that other people are going through what you are and that there can be positive outcomes is so important. Like, for example, I attended an infertility support group like a couple months ago before this COVID situation happened. And one woman was saying how her doctor is sort of recommending that she pursue donor eggs, and she was completely devastated naturally, and like didn't have anyone that she knew that had pursued donor egg IVF. And I said, you know, not to plug my own site, but there are a lot of really inspiring women in our fertility community and articles that I have up on my site that share really positive experiences about women who were sort of called to pursue donor egg IVF. And it's interesting that I say called to, because that's been kind of a common theme in a lot of the stories that I've featured, because, you know, there are different routes you can take. You can do embryo donation, you can do egg donation, you can adopt, you know, although I hate when people say just adopt. That's
right.
that just
Right. Like you mentioned the other day on our call, well, you already have a first child, right? Like that just.
You should feel lucky that you have one, and it's not the case. Like, you have a vision of the way you thought your life was going to be, a picture of what you wanted, and infertility sort of takes that away from you in a way. Like, even just the ability to like have sex and get pregnant, and it's kind of a tough thing to wrap your mind around. So I think seeing positive stories and things that people, and just being able to relate to other women going through something similar, is probably the most powerful piece of what we're doing. And then what was the second part of your question? Sorry.
I don't even remember. Well, we'll just move on to the next one because I don't remember. I'm just like, this is so great. So women can go to the Fertility Tribe and they can connect with each other. You post stories. And I mean, we know the benefit of sharing stories. And so if you're a mama out there who feels like you're all alone, again, you're not. Somebody has been through your unique situation before, and you can probably find her story on your website. You talked about pregnancy challenges post IVF, and I've heard that a lot from friends who had trying times in getting pregnant. Is that something that you're seeing? Or, you know, was it physically trying, or was it mentally trying? Did you have more anxiety? Like, what?
I think that, so I really, when I rebranded and like launched the Fertility Tribe a year ago, I took it from an infertility blog of just my own experiences to a fertility blog. And I really think that is important to differentiate, because while we feature all versions of infertility stories, I also really wanted to feature pregnancy and motherhood stories post infertility, because it's something that I felt really strongly about, and it's also where I currently am in my journey. I think pregnancy after infertility is really difficult. I think, one, just because we know, well, people who've gone through infertility have never really had good news when it's come to their fertility. So when you finally get that good news, it's very hard to wrap your head around. You constantly think like, what's going to go wrong? You read a lot about like chemical pregnancy. So even when you get your HCG results back from your blood tests, and it says you're pregnant, you're like, well, those numbers have to double every 48 hours. So like, it still might not be real. So I should just not get my hopes up. And then when they do double, you're like, well, now I have to wait for to see the heartbeat on the ultrasound. And then it's like waiting for the first trimester to be over, and the second trimester, and viability and all that stuff. So I sort of felt like I had to take it one milestone at a time, because it was really nerve-wracking. And I guess it didn't help my situation either that I was having twins, and my doctor kind of drilled into my head how much of a higher risk it is carrying multiples, which ended up being true in my case. I went into preterm labor at 26 weeks and 6 days.
Wow.
And I spent 25 nights in the hospital, in and out, and 10 weeks on bed rest until I delivered. So thankfully it all worked out. But yeah, I think when things did go south, it was like, oh, I knew this was too good to be true. And then thank God they ended up okay. But then even when I gave birth, sorry, my daughter's crying.
You don't even have to be sorry. Emily and I, again, discuss this all the time. It's like, when we had our call, my kid is in the background. I'm doing homeschooling, showing her a fraud. It is nothing to apologize. You have kids, you are a mother, and you are an entrepreneur.
Yes, it's real life.
It's real life.
But yeah, so now I'm forgetting where I was. But yeah, I think pregnancy after infertility has its own challenges. Motherhood after infertility has its own challenges. I think being a working mom after I struggled so hard to have my twins, it's like, well, I worked so hard to have them. Why am I going to work every day? You know, I think there's just a lot of added layers that it kind of carry with you. And now I'm even in a spot where I'm like, okay, my twins are a year and a half. Like, I know I want more, but I can't just try during quarantine. Like, I have to actually go back to my clinic when, like, you know, I can't even wrap my head around like going through all that again. So it's just, it never really goes away, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So walk me through what, I mean, I've been reading so much about fertility. And I didn't realize that insurance does not cover IVF treatments or egg retrieval or any of that. So,
Well, I think it depends what kind of company you work for, because I actually, my full-time employer did cover a lot of my treatments. I think some companies give like a max, like mine had a lifetime max, I think of 25,000, which I think would have ended up being like 2 IVF cycles. So you kind of have to, I think that's actually one of my biggest pieces of advice at the beginning of your journey, really find out what kind of coverage you have, because I actually had coverage and didn't know it. Like, I knew my IUI cycles were being covered for the most part, but I think everyone just has it in their heads that like IVF is not going to be covered. And then, so that's why I waited, and the doctors were like, you're young, you don't really have to do IVF. But then it just got to a point where I was like, okay, me being young is not really helping me at this point. So, if I had known I was covered, I might have done IVF sooner.
It was covered through your employer or through your employer, like the insurance that your employer had through, or the insurance you had through your
my employer had, yeah.
Oh, that's incredible.
But not everyone's that lucky. And
I've never heard anybody tell me that any of their fertility medical interventions have been at least partially covered. So, and I know that there's countries in Europe where, you know, egg retrieval is, you know, covered by, you know, the country's insurance and health programs. So I hope that one day, hopefully the United States can be as forward thinking as some of those countries. I think France does, and Germany, probably Sweden, because amazing people are happening in Sweden, right, Emily?
I actually just ran an article on my site today about fertility in the workplace, and like why aren't there, even if you do have insurance coverage, whether or not you do, like why aren't there more HR policies in place for, like, say if you needed to take a leave of absence, or if you needed to inform your employer, like there should be protections in place, you know, because I think as women we're kind of taught, like, don't tell your employer when you are wanting to try to have a baby. But then with fertility, like my egg retrieval fell during what was supposed to be a work conference. And I ended up having to tell my bosses that I couldn't go to the trip. And then I ended up like telling HR, and it was a whole thing. And I have an amazing support system at work, but not everyone does. And so I think, like, why, when 1 in 8 couples struggle with this, aren't there more policies in place and insurance coverage? I mean, surrogacy just became legal in New York. It hasn't even gone into effect yet.
That's just so bizarre to me. I just don't understand. It's like a different world because, you know, I mean, capitalism in nature wants more humans to buy and consume more. It would seem that our United States government would want more people having children. So why wouldn't women? I mean, it's definitely more of a patriarchal, masculine challenge, this whole, I mean, if men were the people getting pregnant, this stuff would be covered without having to go through insurance. I fully believe that.
Probably.
Which is a whole other conversation. So, I know that there were some questions that people specifically asked about what you're doing. So let me pull up some of those questions. So what are some positive examples or effects that that sharing stories have on a woman's journey?
I mean, I think I'm a prime example of that. You know, when I was going through infertility, none of my friends even had kids or even were trying, let alone struggling to conceive. So I didn't really have anywhere to turn. I didn't realize that it wasn't as big as it is now, but there was an infertility community on Instagram, but I didn't even think to look there, honestly. And I don't know if it was just my clinic, but I've heard from a lot of infertility warriors that a lot of waiting rooms at fertility clinics aren't particularly warm and inviting, and people are kind of looking at their phones and not. And my clinic didn't offer support groups or any of that stuff, so it just felt like if I didn't have like a supportive husband and a mom and friends that I could lean on, and I wasn't open about it, who would I have turned to? And so I think having this community on Instagram and social media is so important, to be able to find like your people who get it, because I think in general infertility is very hard to understand if you haven't been through it. Like you know, the amount of time it consumes of your life and kind of puts your life on hold. I saw a quote recently that someone in the community created. It was like, everyone's life is put on pause during COVID, but that's kind of how people living with infertility feel all the time. And it's kind of true, because you're like, let me not book that trip because I might be pregnant, or you know, it's always like, what if, or I'm gonna be pregnant by Christmas, and then you're disappointed because you're not. And so it's just, you're constantly feeling like your life is sort of put on pause.
So that leads me to another question, which is, what can friends do, right? Like, what can friends do to support mamas who are going through their fertility experience?
I really think just listening. I think that there's so much unsolicited advice that is given by well-meaning people that are like, and that's one of the reasons I was so open about my journey, is that I felt like I didn't want to deal with people unknowingly saying like, when are you gonna have a baby? Or like, everyone who I love and loved me knew that I wanted to be a mom. So I knew like my dad and my mom and my mother-in-law and everyone were gonna be like, well, what's going on, you know? And so I just kind of wanted to like nip it in the bud and be like, this is what we're going through, don't ask me, you know. But I think overall, just like listening, and instead of just saying, well, at least you're young, or at least this, or at least that, and or just adopt, or have you looked into this? And it's like, someone who's struggling to conceive has probably done everything that you're about to advise them to do. So you know, just listening is the best thing, and being there for someone, really.
Are there any apps or any other, outside of your own website, what do you find to be the most important resource for a mom going through this? Or I keep saying mom, a woman who's desiring to be a mother for the first time or even second time, because secondary infertility, which I do not like that word, is a thing, right? So
it is.
So
I have a lot of moms in my community that are struggling with secondary infertility. Like, they got pregnant no problem the first time, and then had to do IVF the second time. So it's very common. And there's even more of a stigma around it, I think, because people are like, you already have one, you should feel lucky that you have one. And it's like, well, but I pictured having 3 children, and that's what I want. And why can't I be disappointed that I can't give my child a sibling, you know? So that is very prevalent. And I think it's important that all of those things are talked about.
Yeah. What about resources?
Oh yeah. So there's a bunch. I have a whole page on my website dedicated to resources we love. One of my good friends is the founder of Cofertility, and their motto is every fertility question asked and answered. So you can type in like basically anything, and they also have a find a grant tool, so you can look for grant. There's some amazing companies, nonprofits that are offering grants, like Baby Quest grants, and the Bundle of Joy Fund, which is was founded by Samantha Bush and Kyle Bush. And so so Cofertility has those kinds of resources. Fertility IQ is great. They have like videos that if you just like want to know what the IVF process is like, there's that. And then there's some amazing podcasts. Fab Fertility, Blair is hilarious and a good infertility sister of mine. And Infertile AF podcast.
I like that.
That one's awesome too.
Right.
There's also Infertile AF community. Like there's so many amazing women that are just like the biggest cheerleaders for this cause. And some of them are still even going through it themselves. Some of them are on the other side. Some of them have like walked away from treatment and are kind of showing people how like to kind of move beyond. So it's really just such an amazing community.
Amazing. And I'll include all of those links and websites and podcasts that you mentioned in our replay email. Again, if you don't get our emails, you can sign up in the our website or profile on AMA. We'll include everything that Kristyn has mentioned today, and a link to her website, which is just so amazing. I have it open. The fertility glossary is like, it's gold. I mean, this is so good.
Yes, the fertility glossary of terms, TTC, IVF, BFN.
Actually, somebody had mentioned a word that I had to look up, and I didn't see it here, and I don't know if she meant IUD as in an IUD, trying not to get pregnant. She said she had an IUD pregnancy, or something. So I don't know what that means. It doesn't seem like she has a baby yet. So I was going to ask that to the egg whisperer, but I wanted to throw it out there in case you knew what that was.
An IUD pregnancy sounds like she got pregnant with an IUD. I don't know.
Yeah, but she was going through fertility treatment, so I don't know. But I guess we'll ask. If you're on here and you know who you are, just message me. Maybe you meant a different word, but I don't know what that word is, because I see here. So anyways, you have such an incredible website full of incredible information, an awesome Instagram. And again, mamas, if you are going through fertility challenges or even just starting the process, like, it is really useful to join things like AMA, but also the the Fertility Tribe, which is Kristyn's Instagram. Kristyn, we only have a couple more minutes. Is there something that you wanted to talk to the community about?
I think just that, vulnerability is strength. And if you feel like you want to share your story, there's a space for that. And if you just want to read other people's stories, there's a space for that. Social media can be used for so much good and community. And, you'd be surprised at like the response when you do share. I think people just, for the most part, are very supportive. And we also have an email newsletter that goes out every Wednesday, and it's sort of like a play on the Skim for fertility. So that's something that if anyone's interested in signing up for, you can do so on our site. But that's chock full of like all our articles that come out every week, and also some like product discounts and fun stuff, mental health tips from a licensed mental health counselor, nutrition tips. So it's really like everything you need to know if you're trying to conceive this week.
Awesome. I love, there's a quote, I'm on your site. It says, "Fear, to a great extent, is born of a story we tell ourselves. And so I choose to tell myself a different story." And that's Cheryl Strayed. And I just love that quote because it's just so amazing, right? And it has to do with the story we tell ourselves and that vulnerability of sharing with others our deepest secrets, right? And for some reason, fertility challenges seem like secrets we need to keep to ourselves. The same thing with miscarriages. And so, and I think that what you're doing, which is so important, is letting down the stigma of infertility being something that happens to other people. But when you look at the data and you see that 1 in 8 are dealing with fertility challenges, you realize, and 1 in 4 are dealing with, I don't know a better word for miscarriage, but dealing with spontaneous abortion. I don't know.
Pregnancy loss, I guess.
Pregnancy loss, yeah, that's much better. You realize really quickly that you aren't alone, and that you probably have a really dear friend who is going through that. And so, again, I can't stress how important the work that you're doing is, and how creating community for women and their families, because I know that you have some stuff on there for men too, and that's actually a whole different conversation, but that we'll have another time. But it's not always just you, right? It's not only just the woman. There's 2 people that need to have perfect timing, perfect sperm, perfect eggs, like to make children. And so we'll go in deeper because next I'm talking to the egg whisperer, Dr. Amy, who's amazing. But again, like you're not alone. You are not doing this alone. And Instagram, Facebook, I know there's local support groups that talk about these things are really great assets. I mean, and we live in a time where there's so much information that is free. So you never can complain about something not being available. Maybe the treatments are not, and those I know can get pretty pricey, but there's just access to so much goodness. And so your website is one of those gold mines. And so ladies, if you're watching, go to thefertilitytribe.com. Make sure to hit up that fertility glossary because there are words on there that I was like, wow, that's what that stands for.
It's like a cheat sheet before you get immersed in the infertility Instagram community. You're like, what are they talking about?
Yeah, it's amazing. So thank you so much, Kristyn, for coming again. We will be sending out this information plus some amazing resources that I think you've selected for us to send out to our email community. And we'll include a link to your website and all that amazing information. So thank you, ladies. Thank you, Kristyn.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. I can't wait to have you on again.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Talk soon.